Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL round 11 betting review. Here we're going to go through all the games from the weekend, look at how teams won and lost these games, and in particular look at them from a betting perspective. We're going to go through where the money went on these games, who covered the spread, did it go over or under the total, and also look at some of the teams' trends with these games included. You can use that information moving forward. It's always really important to review games and look at what happened, as it's going to give you a better indication on how those teams play. So not only watching games, but also looking through the data and what transpired in that matchup. Through round 11, we had 5 games go under the total, 3 games go over. So overall in the season now, 51 games have gone under, 37 have gone over. So still a strong trend overall this season towards NRL games going under the closing total line. This means moving forward that you're going to progressively start to see lower totals on games as bookmakers try to even that up, though they do prefer more games going under the total than they do going over. If that number was the opposite and it was 51 over, 37 under, then we'd start to see some kind of outrageously high totals, so more games start going under because they know the general public likes to bet overs more than they like to bet under. So right now, that's what the bookmakers are wanting to see. Away teams won 5 games on the weekend and covered the spread in 6 of 8 games. Home teams, though, are still 47-41 against the spread. Favorites only won 4 games, so another 4 wins by the underdog. The underdogs who won on the weekend were the Seagulls beating the Cowboys, Sharks beating the Storm, Dragons beating the Broncos, and then Rabbitohs beating the Tigers in the final game. Underdogs also covered the spread in 5 of 8 games. Right now in the season, underdogs are 47-41 against the spread. The favorites who covered, the Eels against the Knights, 28-6 covered the spread in that game. Warriors covered against the Dolphins in a fairly close game there. And then Raiders in a 16-point win over the Titans covered as well. All the other games, the underdog covered the spread. Look at the first game, Knights versus Eels. Parramatta won this game 28 points to 6. The money came for the Eels as well. They were $2.20 into $1.85, covered the spread. The game went under the total, and it was correct, moving down from 46.5 down to 44.5. Newcastle have now lost 7 of their last 8 games and only covered the spread 2 times this season. So they're 2-8 against the spread. In the NRL best bets, you have tools in there where you can break down each team by different situations. So you can look at home games, away games, when they're favorite, when they're an underdog. Are they covering the spread in that situation? Are the games going over or under? There's lots of ways you can split this information down. Also for the Knights, 9 of their 10 games have gone under the total this season. Just the game against the Sharks went over. For the Eels, this was their 3rd win. They're now 3-3 through their last 6 games, so a lot better than they were in the first month of the year. They've covered the spread in 5 of their last 8, and all 3 games since their bye have gone under, and 7 of their last 9 games have gone under. For this game in particular, the Eels got 2 early tries through Mitch Moses and Zach Lomax. They were the only tries in the first half. So the Eels went into the break leading 10-0. Lomax got his 2nd shortly after halftime, and that pushed the Eels out to a 16-point lead. Then they also got 2 tries through Dylan Brown and Jordan Samrani, plus a penalty goal through the 10-minute period whilst Kai Pearce-Paul was in the sin bin. So 12-0 against that period, pushed the margin out 28-0, and then James Schiller got a late try to at least put the Knights on the board. For Newcastle, after 2 good weeks, they scored 50 points across their previous 2 games through this. They're back to their attacking struggles. Another game with 0 points in the first half. That's now the 6th time this season that's happened. They lost the meters gain battle once again. We'll bring up some of the stats here. They're giving up more line breaks over the past month as well, averaging 6 a game. They gave up 7 in this matchup, and we're only giving up 2 through their first 6 games of the season. Also, offloads for the Knights are well down, just a 6. And even though they're not making many offloads, their error count, which for this game was 14, is still really high. You pretty much expect the Knights to make 14 to 16 errors every single game. They also missed 49 tackles, which was a season high. For the Eels, the 28 points was their 2nd highest score of the season, and even though they only scored 10 points, that was their equal highest score in a first half this year. Also, it was the first time keeping an opponent scoreless in the first half. Last 2 weeks with their line breaks have both been season highs at 7, and the 3 line breaks they conceded, which the Knights got, was their lowest of the year. Also really positive for the Eels, just 22 missed tackles. That was a season best, and they've been averaging 35 a game, so well below their average. Moving forward from this game, Newcastle will play the Panthers, who come into that off the bye last week. But keep in mind this week, all the Origin representative players are going to be out. We'll be posting a preview later in the week going through all the upcoming games. Make sure you stay tuned for that. And then for the Eels, they'll play the Seagulls at home this weekend. Bulldogs versus Roosters. Bulldogs came from behind to win, but the Roosters covered the spread. Bulldogs were $1.37 out to $1.54, and the game went under 44.5, but did move up from 43.5 through the week. This was the Bulldogs' 3rd straight win. They're now 9-1 on the season, just the 1 loss against the Broncos, and only the 3rd time they haven't covered the spread. They're 7-3 ATS this year. Roosters are now 4-6 on the season, but have covered the spread in 4 of their last 5 games. Roosters scored 2 tries in the first half. They led 14-0 at halftime when you add in the conversions and the penalty goal. But the Bulldogs came out of the break very similar to what they did last week against Canberra. They scored 3 straight tries after halftime. That put them in front, and now they're leading the game. Mark Nawaqanitawai scored a really kind of miracle try down that right sideline, which put the Roosters back in front. That try that he scored was one of those situations where you could try and recreate it 10 more times, and the little chip that he put in, that ball could have bounced. You do that 10 more times, that ball will bounce a different way every single time. And just thankfully, for the sake of the good try, it sat up ideally for him, like landed on the exact point of the ball that it needed to, which popped it up, and he was able to get there and ground it down the sideline. But nonetheless, a really good try. Then shortly after that, Matt Burton scored, which put the Bulldogs back in front, and they were able to hold on for the final 5 minutes. For this game, the Bulldogs were held scoreless for the 3rd time in the past 4 weeks in the first half. So really struggling to get points on the board early in games, but they're consistently performing well in the second half. They scored 24 points this week in that second half, which means they've now had 24 plus in each of their past 3 weeks in terms of second half points scored. Down here with the error count, they only made 8 errors for the game, which was ultimately the difference here between the two sides. They benefited from the Roosters making 17 errors, which is the most that any team's made against the Bulldogs so far this season. Bulldogs also continued to dominate field position in games. They had 49 plays inside the Roosters' 20-meter zone, which is a consistent pattern for the Bulldogs. Sometimes when teams get down that end of the field and score quickly, their plays inside that 20-meter zone stays fairly low, or if you're scoring tries from beyond the 20-meter mark. But Bulldogs are getting plenty of tackles down there, so if they can just clean up their plays and set plays inside that zone, they'll probably find some more points considering the field position they're getting. Roosters, 67% completion rate, 17 errors. With that in mind, they're probably lucky to be in the contest here against the Bulldogs, but they still performed well outside of that, kept the Bulldogs to just the 4 line breaks, did well from that perspective. In terms of the 17 errors, they did have one other game this season where they had 19 errors. That was back against the Gold Coast Titans. They lost that game by 18 points, so it's very hard to win when you're making that many mistakes. Both teams here were low in post-contact meters, with 2 good fullbacks, but both were somewhat playing small, especially the Bulldogs, under 500 post-contact meters. Recently, the Roosters have started to be a lot more disciplined, just giving away the 4 penalties and 1 set restart, which is good to see for them. And they've done that the past 3 games. They went from averaging over 7 penalties per game through the first 7 weeks. Kept the Bulldogs scoreless in the first half, as I mentioned, and that was the first time the Roosters have done that to an opponent this season. Bulldogs will play the Dolphins on Thursday this week. Then they have an 18-day break. So they have the bye and an extended rest as playing on the Thursday before they'll play the Parramatta Eels. Roosters are on again this week where they'll play the Sharks on Saturday night. Dolphins versus Warriors. Warriors won 16-12. They covered the spread and were backed in from $1.85 into $1.80. And the game went under 47.5 and moved down from 48.5 through the week. Redcliffe have now lost 3 of their last 4 games, with the only win being against Parramatta, and also failed to cover the spread in 3 of their past 4. Warriors, this was their 5th straight win, and have also now won 8 of their last 9 games and covered 7 of their last 9. So not only winning games, but they're also beating the betting odds as well. 4 of their last 5 have gone under the total. Warriors scored 2 tries to 0 in the first half, led 10-0 at halftime. And then there were no points through the majority of the second half. You can see the first try not until the 69th minute. That pushed the Warriors out to a 16-0 lead. That try there somewhat sparked the Dolphins into a bit of action, which is a pattern we've seen for them. They do like a lot of nothing for a long period of time and then suddenly come with a surge when they're just about out of time in the game. Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow scored in the 71st minute. Then James Fisher-Harris was sin-bin in the 76th. The Dolphins still needed 2 tries. They then got one through Herbie Farnworth and were a chance of stealing this game from being down 16 points with 10 to go. But the Warriors were able to hold on similar fashion to they did last week against the Dragons. Dolphins were kept scoreless in the first half for the first time this year, and even though they had the majority of the ball in 54% possession in this game, only managed the 2 tries, both coming very late. The 28 total points scored, 16-12, was the lowest total score for a Dolphins game this season, and they only made 2 line breaks, which is an equal season low, but also only conceded 2 line breaks, which is an equal season best on the other side of things. Scrolling down, they missed 30 tackles in this game. Still though, it's an improvement. Like, you can't, if they can get around the 30 mark, that's probably good for them. The last 3 weeks, they've been averaging 43 missed tackles a game, so at least they didn't miss as many this week. Warriors led at halftime for the 4th straight week, however have now lost the second half in each of their last 4 games, but they're doing enough to hold on and win. Only 8 errors again this week. As you can see, they're really good, same as last week. So they're consistently completing really well, 82%. That's right on their average overall for the season. Dolphins made the most errors down here with the 16 errors. That's the most any teams made against the Warriors this season, and probably was a large part due to the Dolphins losing this game. Warriors gave up 6 set restarts to 2, and that's something they've been doing a lot more of recently. They're now averaging 3.6 set restarts per game on the season after giving away just a total of 4 set restarts. They had 1, 2, and 1 through their first 3 games of the year. Dolphins have the Bulldogs on Friday, then they have a bye after that, and the Warriors are back at home after 3 straight road games. But they'll have to face the Raiders, who bounced back to near their best last week against the Titans. Cowboys versus Seagulls. The Seagulls went up there and won as the underdog, covered the spread, and were 210 into 205, so were backed in slightly. The game went under 51.5 after moving up from 50.5 through the week. Cowboys have now failed to win any of their past 3 games and still only led at halftime on 2 occasions this whole season. However, the Cowboys have covered the spread in 6 of their past 8 matches. Seagulls are now back to 5-5 on the season, so in a somewhat good position. Their last 5 games have gone under the total. Overall in this match, teams went 1 try each in the first half. Saab scored early, then Robert Derby scored near enough to halftime. 6 all at the break. Then the Seagulls dominated the second half, scoring 3 tries to 0 and ran out 24-point winners. 2 of those tries came pretty late in the game, in around that final 10 minutes or so. This was the Cowboys' lowest score of the season, where they had just 6 points. A bit of a drop-off in the meters gained as well, 1,600 this week. And also post-contact meters at 474. This is about 100 less than what we generally see and expect from the Cowboys in a game. They conceded 7 line breaks, which is also almost double what they've been doing this season, particularly in their past 4 games. And only made 2 line breaks themselves, which is an equal season low. So overall, like a really disappointing performance from the Cowboys, especially considering they had plus 17 runs. Cowboys also had the most plays inside Manly Seagulls 20-meter zone of any game they've had this season, but only managed 6 points. This was the first second half they've lost. They're minus 18, and the last time they lost the second half was all the way back in round 2 against the Sharks. So when it was 6-all at halftime, you really expected the Cowboys to be the side to win that second half, but that certainly wasn't the case. The Seagulls, this was the lowest score they've kept an opponent to this season, and the first time they've only conceded 1 try for a game this year. Still struggling scoring in the first half. They're averaging just 4 points across their past 5 games in first half, but conceded just the 2 line breaks and missed 20 tackles. Both of those are season best. This was also their first game this season with over 90% tackle efficiency. They also had a season high 14 offloads, not something we generally see from Manly. Cowboys have the bye this week, followed by what will effectively be their 3rd straight home game against the Tigers. And the Seagulls are on a 6-day turnaround to play Parramatta this week after travelling back from North Queensland. Sharks versus Storm. Sharks won at home 31-26, keeping their good record at home against the Storm going. Sharks drifted from 235 out to 275, and the game went over the 46.5 point total. Sharks have won and covered 5 of their past 6 games, and this was just their 3rd game of the year to go over the total. Storm, this was their 3rd loss in their last 5 games and their first time trailing at halftime this season. They've failed to cover 4 of their last 5 and a 7-3 to the over this season. This was probably the game of the round, that's for sure. Storm scored first through Grant Anderson, and in the 4th minute, it looked like the Storm might be on, especially after 64-0 against the Tigers last week. But the Sharks got it back quickly through Ronaldo Militao, and then scored the next 2 tries following that through Fanua Blake, crashing over under the post, and Dan Atkinson, who came on to replace Sam Stonestreet, who was injured. So effectively 3 tries in a row here for the Sharks, and that helped them build a little bit of a lead. Xavier Coates got his first try before halftime, but a late try to Kale Iro from a good set play off the scrum, and then Braden Trindle's field goal right on halftime pushed the margin out to 13 points for the Sharks, a 25-12 lead at halftime. Storm, as was probably expected, came out firing after halftime. Xavier Coates went in, Nick Meaney went in the space of 2 minutes, and from there, the Storm had it back to a 3-point margin and looked like they might roll over the top of the Sharks. But to their credit, Cronulla got the momentum back. They had, in that situation, it really could have gone either way. They didn't have the game won at halftime. You got to play the full 80 minutes to beat the Storm. They got a try through Dan Atkinson, and that extended the margin back out beyond a converted try for them. There was then about a 15-minute period of no points. Then Xavier Coates leapt up, sat on Dan Atkinson's shoulders, AFL style, pretty much close enough to a mark of the year in the AFL, and was able to get the ball down, and then that brought it back to a 5-point margin, and Sharks were able to hold on for that final 10 minutes or so, and did really well to do that. This was the Sharks' best first half performance of the season with those 25 points. Not their best meters gained or post-contact meters. They only had 168 runs. So to still score 31 points against the Storm with these kind of numbers is really, really good. And 23 tackle breaks as well. Whilst it was more than the Storm had with 20, still running in 31 points, that was really good. And shows they took advantage of the opportunities that they had and turned them into points. The conceding the 12 points against the Storm in the first half, not too bad considering the Storm averaged the most points in first halves of any team. And this means now for the Sharks, they've only conceded more than 12 points still once overall on the season, which was back against Canberra Raiders. Sharks only missed the 20 tackles, and after missing just 17 last week against the Seagulls, they've been really strong defensively. Still conceding 26 points though, but you can forgive it a little bit being against the Storm. For the Storm, second highest score they've conceded this season with those 31 points, and more than double they've conceded in a first half this year, and that was obviously the key to the Sharks winning this game. Had slightly more possession, more runs, more meters gained, more post-contact meters, but less line breaks after having 10 last week as well, and only 20 tackle breaks. So in alignment with those, with Sharks just missing the 20 tackles, that was the lowest number of tackle breaks Melbourne's had this season. Storm won the penalty count for the first time since round 4. You can see Sharks conceded 7 to the 5 that Melbourne conceded. Whilst they did win the penalty count, they did lose set restarts and gave up 5 ruck infringements. Storm have kept an opponent to 8 or less in the second half for the 4th consecutive week, so they are limiting scoring, and a lot of time Melbourne are in front at halftime. Positive signs for them that they aren't giving up too many points in second halves and letting teams come back into games. For the Sharks, they'll play the Roosters this week, followed by the bye, which for the Sharks, they definitely need that. This was their first home game in quite some time, and they get the bye following the game against the Roosters. and they have a couple of home games after that. And then for the Storm, they have the bye this week, and then they're on the road up to the Gold Coast to play the Titans. First game on Sunday, the Dragons kept their really good record. They've now won 8 of the past 10 against the Broncos, winning this 30-26. The Dragons, obviously as an underdog here, also covered the spread. They were $3.55 out to $3.75, and the game went over the 50.5 point total. Brisbane have now lost 5 of their last 6 games, with the only winning somehow being against the Bulldogs, who that's the only game they've lost this season. Broncos have failed to cover 8 of their last 10, so really struggling to cover the spread and are constantly being overestimated by bookmakers. Dragons snapped a 3-game losing streak and have now covered their last 2, and 3 of their last 4 games have gone over the total. Broncos started this game, they scored the first 2 tries. Then Terrell Sloan got a try near halftime in the 32nd minute. That was like a bit of a contentious one. You can see how they could pay it as a try. One of those situations where it could have really gone either way. But that kept the Dragons in the game, 12-4 at halftime. Then the Dragons scored the first 2 tries after the break through Clint Gutherson and Jacob Little. That put St. George in front in this game. But it was a pretty high-scoring second half. Tony Staggs scored for the Broncos. That put them back in front. Then Terrell Sloan got his second. Clint Gutherson got his second, which pushed the margin out beyond 2 tries for the Dragons. Jesse Arthurs scored a late try, but it wasn't enough for the Broncos to win this game. They're trying at the end to score a miracle try in the final couple of minutes, but Dragons held on. The key for this game that I want to point out, Jaden Stewart sin bin in the 49th minute. During that period, Broncos took a penalty goal right here, which is something that I just really don't like seeing teams do when the opponent's down a man and it's still like somewhat a close game. Go for points in that situation. Even if you don't score a try, at least give up the ball right on the try line. So maybe the opponent will get it out to the 30 or the 40 meter line, and then you'll still have good field position in the next set, as opposed to going all the way back down the other end of the field for a kickoff. But nonetheless, during that period, the Broncos only scored the 2 points, but the Dragons scored 2 tries. Both of them converted to a 12-2 period whilst they were down for the Dragons. And ultimately, that was the difference. A 10-point difference whilst Dragons with 12 on the field and a 4-point win for them. Broncos had less possession for the 7th time in their last 8 games. Like, this one wasn't much, but they're consistently having less of the ball. Did have more meters gained and more post-contact meters and more line breaks. They're +4 in line breaks. So statistically, from those numbers, they probably should have won this game. But as I said, that key period, whilst they had the extra player on the field, didn't take advantage of that at all. 72% completion rate, 13 errors, and this kind of brings us to the other key difference, that whilst the Broncos made more meters, 13 errors to 6, that's what kept the Dragons in the game. They didn't give away the ball cheaply at all. The Dragons, with those 6 errors, was the least that any opponents made against the Broncos this season. And for Brisbane, they're also giving up too many set restarts, 4-0. They didn't get any set restarts this week and lost the second half. This is a big one. They lost the second half for the 9th time in their last 10 games. They're unable to play like a full 80 minutes, which is what it takes to beat a lot of teams. Like, even when you're versing teams that are in the bottom half of the ladder, you still need to play the whole game. And it definitely seems like there's just too many players in this Broncos team at the moment who aren't really interested in playing and potentially just turning up for a paycheck or whatnot. So I think Michael Maguire will definitely need to make some kind of dramatic team changes, put some players into the reserves, even if it might seem like it's going to cost them games or whatever going forward. I think it needs to give the team a bit more energy and show that you're not just going to turn up in the team every single week, regardless of how we're playing. For the Dragons, this was their second highest score of the season, and considering they only got 4 points in the first half, which the first halves for the Dragons have been a bit of a problem. They've been kept to 8 or less in 4 of their past 5 games, and the only exception to that was 10 points against the West Tigers. They did give up 7 line breaks, which is almost double their average of the season. So whilst they won the game, the defensively wasn't super good, and that was also the second highest they've given up overall on the season. Did well, though, to keep the opposition to just 4 tries. The 6 errors that they had was their best of the season. They had 11 or more in each of their past 7 games. So that 6 errors is a little bit of an anomaly. The 87% completion rate was a season high. Dragons have trailed at halftime in each of their past 4 games, but have won the second half in each of their last 3. The 40 points in the second half of both teams combined was an equal season high for the Dragons. Both teams have the bye this week. Broncos will have the Seagulls down at Manly following that, and the Dragons will have the Knights at home. Raiders versus Titans. Raiders won 40-24. They're $1.35 into $1.28 covered the spread, and the game went over 48.5. Raiders bounced back after losing to the Bulldogs last week. They've now won 6 of their last 7, as well as covered 6 of their last 7, and 7 of their last 11 have gone over the total. That's overall in the season. Titans have now lost 6 of their last 7, and the only win being against Newcastle last week, where they came from behind to win that game, where Newcastle fell to pieces. They've failed to cover in 6 of their last 7, and 3 of the last 4 Titans games have gone over the total. Raiders scored 4 tries to 2 in the first half, but only one of those tries was converted, which kept the Titans in the game. It was only an 18-12 scoreline, so 6 points at the break. And whilst you thought the Raiders were still going to win this game comfortably, the missed conversions, they could have been leading by a lot more at the break. Second half, the Raiders ran in the first 3 tries of the second half, which pushed the margin right out. Titans ran in a couple of tries, but ultimately Raiders won the game by 16, but probably should have won by 20 plus. Another 40-point game for Canberra, and equal season high 8 tries, which with the 50% conversion rate could have been more. They had 55% possession in this game, and they've had more of the ball in 5 of their past 6 games. 8 line breaks was an equal season best, and we're almost plus 500 in meters gained. So 1985 to 1503, almost plus 200 in post-contact meters, which this is really good to see for Canberra after losing the meters battle by almost 300 last week against the Bulldogs. It's good to see them get that area sorted. This was also the lowest post-contact meters they've conceded on the year at the 441. Season high 18 offloads, and also a season best, just 16 missed tackles for Canberra. Penalty count was 6-1 in favour of Gold Coast, but didn't really matter overall in the scheme of the game. Titans, this was their 6th straight game with at least 3 tries. They're pretty much scoring 3 or 4 tries every single week, but they've only won 1 game from those 6. The Titans had the 16 tackle breaks, which is their lowest of the season, and also well down on their average. Last week against Newcastle in the game that they won, they had 23 offloads. In this game, just 5 offloads. So Canberra did really well at shutting that down. And also for the Titans, 6 of their 10 games have had 30 plus points scored in the second half. Raiders are over to New Zealand to play the Warriors this week, and Titans have the bye, followed by the Melbourne Storm at home, who are also off the bye. Last game of the round, the Rabbitohs beat the Tigers 22-12, 4 tries to 2 in favour of South Sydney. Cover the spread as underdogs. They're $1.90 out to $2, and the game went under 44.5 after moving down from 46.5. Back-to-back losses for the Tigers, and they failed to cover the spread in both, and back-to-back wins for the Rabbitohs, and they've covered the spread in 8 of 11 games this season, which definitely surprises me a little bit. And also for the Rabbitohs, all 11 games have gone under the total. Rabbitohs scored the first 2 tries and controlled the first half for the most part, including the 1 try whilst the Tigers were down with Lockie Galvin being sin-binned. Upside Corral scored close to halftime, which definitely brought the margin back and kept the Tigers in the contest. It's a lot different being down 6 points to 12 points at halftime. Being down 12 points at halftime, like, you definitely need to be the first team to score after the break, but just down 6 points, the Rabbitohs could score first, but the Tigers could still win the game. There were no points for close to 20 minutes in the second half. Alex Johnston scored the first try at about the 59th minute mark. That did then stretch the lead out for the Rabbitohs. But Tallis Duncan got sin bin here in the 67th minute, which was one of those like real stupid sin bins where didn't need to be done. Like any time where the opposition's 5 meters out from the goal line and you walk through the play the ball and kick the ball away, it's the easiest decision ever for the ref to send you to the sin bin. At least like just hold down in the tackle or something like that where it's not as blatantly obvious. But ultimately it didn't matter. The Rabbitohs were able to hold on, but was a little bit sketchy because Coruscant scored, brought the margin right back to 4 points at that period. But a late try through Jai Arrow sealed the margin for a 10-point win to South Sydney. Tigers, at least they got some points this week after being held scoreless last week. Both tries through the dummy half in Coruscant. Tigers generated over 2,000 run meters for the first time this season, and also a season high post-contact meters. So you can see, but also did concede a season high post-contact meters for the opposition. Both teams putting up huge numbers in this game and not being able to bring players down on first contact. They have given up over 1,700 meters gained in each of their last 4 matches, so do need to sort it out a little bit. Only conceded 4 line breaks after giving up 22 across their past 2 games against the Dragons and the Storm. They won the penalty count and the set restart count, 8-3 penalty count and 5-3 set restart count, but didn't matter in terms of the overall scoreline. The Tigers have lost the second half in 7 of their past 8 games. And the only time they won the second half was when they were +2 in the second half against Newcastle. Rabbitohs back-to-back wins with virtually the same scoreline. They won 22-12 this week. Last week against Broncos won 22-14. Rabbitohs found 12 points in the first half here after being held scoreless in the first half in 3 of their past 4 games. 88% completion rate, really good. That was their highest of the season. They did miss 38 tackles, which somewhat slightly mentioned before. Just 38 missed tackles right there. They've now missed 37 or more tackles in 7 of their last 9 games. So if teams can capitalize on those missed tackles, they're going to beat South Sydney. They've had less run meters than their opponent in all 11 games this season as well, which is a touch concerning for their forward pack, and meaning they're having to do everything off the back foot. Tigers moving forward have the bye this week, then are up to North Queensland to play the Cowboys, and the Rabbitohs also have the bye. But following that, we'll have the Warriors at home. So that's a look at all the games from the weekend. This weekend, there's only the 5 games. You've got the Bulldogs versus Dolphins, Eels versus Seagulls, Panthers versus Knights, Roosters, Sharks, and Warriors versus Raiders. Best 2 games are definitely the final 2, that's for sure. But I'm going to be posting a preview later in the week going through these games. We'll also go through the try scorers, so stay tuned for that video. If you want all the try score information, make sure you're a part of the Best Bets membership, which you can access through the link in the description. That's where you can also get a ton of tools to do your research on games as well. Looking at the ladder, Bulldogs sit a game clear of the Warriors, who are a game clear of the Raiders, who are a game clear of the Storm and Sharks. That's your top 5. Then there's a bit of a logjam from 6th down to 12th. Only 1 win separates the Seagulls and the West Tigers. And then we have 4 teams tied on 8 competition points: the Dolphins, Knights, Eels, and Titans. Likely one of those 4 teams is your wooden spoon winner come the end of the season. Thanks guys for watching. Really appreciate you following along in the channel. If you want to make money betting on the NRL, make sure you're subscribed. Keep watching these videos right throughout the season. It's going to help level up your skills as an NRL bettor. And I'm going to be posting as much content as I can, not only game previews, but also things you can do to research games, things you can look for to make your analysis of the NRL even better so that you can then make more money. I'll see you guys in the next video.